realms. And this is stuff that we've already touched on, and we're messing around with it, but to make it explicit might be helpful. The idea is this. God is the creator of all that is. And his creation. First article stuff here. God's the creator, preserver, his creation. And we know from what the Bible tells us that God deals with his creation in two different kinds of ways. And traditionally, we talk about these being the left hand of God and the right hand of God. And of course, to even talk about the hands of God is kind of silly, because does God have a hand? No, God's spirit. He's not physical. He doesn't have hands. He doesn't have a face. We do that all the time, and we have a nice name for that. What do we call that? Personification? Yeah, personification is when you take an idea and make it into a human thing, like wisdom being treated like a real being. So Lady Wisdom. That's personification. That's close. Oh, good. I get to give you another $15 word. You will remember it when you see it. Okay? Anthropomorphism. You guys know that one, right? So what is an anthropomorphism? Is when you take a human, anthropos, okay, a human, morphism is a form, a human shape. So you're giving a human shape or human form to God. So to talk about God's face or God's arm or God's hand or the feet of God on his footstool, well, that's an anthropomorphism. To be distinguished from, while we're at it here, an anthropopathism. Anthropopathism is to give a human emotion to God, okay? Because pathos is the emotion or feeling. So you talk about God getting angry or God being happy. Well, that's an anthropopathism, because God really is, well, he's God and doesn't have the same kinds of feelings, emotions we do, but we put human emotions onto him. The Bible does this all the time. This is not wrong or bad. It's simply trying to make God accessible to us, which is what Revelation is all about. You have God, who is God, wholly other, on this other plane of being than we are. We're creatures, he's creator, and yet God deigns to come to us and speak to us in ways that we can grasp, and he does it in anthropomorphic and anthropopathic ways. So, yeah, we're okay with that. Jacob?
Isn't that what Kolb says, though? Usually tells us more about ourselves. And
sure, because a lot of times we are projecting onto God things we think. This is the, this is now we're off into philosophy here. This is the big criticism of Feuerbach. Feuerbach's big gripe about Christianity, about any religion, was religion tells more about the person than it is about God, because all you're doing is you're taking your highest aspirations and putting them onto God. That criticism is legitimate, but it's also overwrought when you start saying, well, see, so Christianity is invalid. The fact of the matter is, God does reveal himself to us in ways that are comprehensible to us, which means in anthropomorphic and anthropopathic ways. So it's not entirely fair to say these are just human projections. It can be that, like the Hindu who sits around and visions God like whatever his ideal is. But the fact is, God does reveal himself to us in these kinds of terms. All right. Now, so back to our left and our right hand. God doesn't have a left and right hand. That was the whole point. However, we do understand God working in two different ways. So the concept, the vision, is God on his throne ruling his creation, and he does it these two different ways. In the left hand, he is concerned about the civil realm. And you hear civil, don't just narrow it right down to politics. It's more than that. Civil includes politics, but civil also includes the home. Civil also includes nature. Civil would also include things like the economy and just all the stuff in the world that get things running along. And the government is very much in mind here. The government, as the government directs and cares for and oversees the political realm. Romans 13 teaches us that whose government is it? It's God's government. So God is the one who establishes the government. Why? to make sure that the home is cared for, that families are protected. Family fits in here. Marriage actually belongs over here. Marriage is part of the left hand, not the right. All right, we'll get to the right in a minute. This is all here in the left hand. The right hand is interested in our standing before God, where we stand before God. This is interested in the proclamation of the gospel. This is interested in the forgiveness of sins. Here we have peace given to us because it is declared. Here we have forensic justification. And here we have the peculiar work of the church. This is the church's task. Over here, we have righteousness, but here we have earned righteousness. You earn it by your behavior. And here we have working toward peace. Don't have it yet, but we're working at it. Over here, we have the Word. And that's it. And we have, the Word comes, as St. Paul says, in weakness. Over here, we've got the sword. And the sword comes with power and strength. But there's power over here, too. It's just not quite so evident. Now, we see these things kind of working and God doing His thing. Over here, the goal is the preservation of nature. Keep a lid on things. Keep things from falling apart. Keep the whole mess from rotting into nothing. Just kind of keep a lid on it. Over here, the goal is the full restoration. And the putting things back where they're supposed to be. So these are working in harmony. They are not at odds. There are many Christian traditions that will set these things at odds. The Anabaptists are notorious for this, and they're modern-day manifestations of this, like Mennonites, Amish, some Baptist groups, Jehovah's Witnesses will kind of fall into that thing, where they see the enemy as the government or the world, and you can't say the Pledge of Allegiance, and this kind of radical pacifism, this kind of stuff. Well, that's typical of this over against sort of a thing. We recognize that it is God who is at work in both realms. In the right-hand realm, we're all about the gospel. But in the left-hand realm, what is running the show? The law is. And human reason plays a big part, because how do you decide how to rule? What's the right thing to do? You think things out. You sort it out. Even things like environment would come in over here too. So how do you care for things in the world? Well, you figure it out. You follow God's rules, God's law, and you come to conclusions. And this distinction between the two realms helps us to really kind of sort things out as what needs to be done or how we're supposed to doing things. For example, when you're in the left-hand realm, do you make decisions based on the gospel? No. If you do that, you get really silly kinds of things going on. You get this kind of notion that, and I just saw it today. Some guy was driving in front of me on the way over here to the Sem, and he had on a bumper sticker on the back of his Jetta, "What would Jesus bomb?" Okay? And this big, explosion. What would Jesus bomb? And the implication, of course, is, well, nothing. He wouldn't bomb anybody. And so the implication, of course, is that for the country to go to war is always wrong, and Jesus would never do such a thing. If Jesus was in charge, he wouldn't do it, so therefore you shouldn't do it, and therefore everybody needs to work against war. War is always wrong. Now, in the left-hand realm, that's asinine. No better word for it. It's just stupid. That's the kind of, so that's the idea that, well, I'm Christian, therefore I've always got to be for peace. That doesn't work that way. And this idea that, well, you have to turn the other cheek. What do you mean? In the left-hand realm, it's not about turning the other cheek. That's not the job. The job here is to thwart evil. Stop what is evil, prevent evil, keep things from falling apart. So if you have a rogue nation, a la, or i.e. Adolf Hitler, what are you supposed to do? Well, turn the other cheek. They tried that. Neville Chamberlain tried it. He's got a real nice place in history now. All right? Everybody really admires his efforts at appeasement. Okay? But you see, that's what he was trying to do. Well, let's turn the other cheek. We'll try to get along. There's a time and a place for taking the sword out and using it. Because in this realm, there is nasty stuff going on. And God uses this to get his work accomplished, which is preserve, keep things in check. Is he proclaiming gospel over here? No. It's not the business of this realm. This business over here is just keep the world from falling apart. Keep the wheels on. Over here, the business of the church then, the work of the church is to proclaim the gospel, make known the peace that is there, and teach the forgiveness of sins. Over here, yeah, you turn the other cheek all the time. Of course you do. Not over here. And so these two realms are an important distinction. And it leads to some rather intriguing thoughts. Veith, in his book, picks up on this a little bit and starts to run into this kind of distinction. Traditionally, we call this the two kingdoms doctrine, but that's really not the best designation because it's confusing, because Luther frequently talked about the two kingdoms being God's kingdom and Satan's kingdom, and people sometimes hear two kingdoms and they think, well, God's kingdom, Satan's kingdom, well, that's easy. This one's God's kingdom. This must be Satan's kingdom. That's not true, because this is God's kingdom too. God is working over here in the left hand, accomplishing his purposes. That's why I really do prefer the language two realms, the two areas of action. So God works in the left hand realm, and he works in the right hand realm, doing what he wants to have done. And really, in a sense, he has a different agenda in both places. Over here, it's just the preservation of justice. And that's a good thing as far as it goes. Over here, it is the declaration of forgiveness of sins. And that's a very good thing. They're just two different realms. Good example of this. The inmate on death row becomes a Christian, knows God's love and forgiveness, is repentant for everything they've done. If I confuse the realms, I might say, well, hey, this person doesn't deserve to die. They've got forgiveness. Everything's cool. But if I understand the two realms, I'll say, great, this person has the forgiveness of sins, knows where they stand with God. I'm really glad. So now when we fry him in the chair, he'll go right to heaven. Heaven. Okay? All right? But you see, he still has a responsibility to pay whatever, because that's the way it is. That's just the wages of sin. That's what is built in. That's the sword of the state. And it would be wrong for someone to say to the state, oh, come on, you got to show mercy, you got to show gospel. No, the state is all about the sword. That's what it does. Now, obviously, it gets a little more complicated than this, but I wanted to give you at least this much. And you need to realize then, in the left-hand realm, human reason and the law, great stuff. Really important. Which is also why Luther can say something kind of wild like, I would rather be ruled by a just and reasonable and wise Turk than by a foolish Christian. It's just because somebody Christian, doesn't make them a legitimate and a wise ruler. And we have seen that in the history of our own country. So Christianity is not the mark of a good ruler. Sharp guy who knows what justice is and who does justice, that's the mark of a good ruler. Sort of the same. We do the same thing with a car mechanic. Do I take my car to the mechanic who's got a little fish out in front of his shack, and he charges a little bit too much and he's kind of sloppy in his work? Or do I take my car to the mechanic who's got the foul mouth and the bad attitude, but he has a fair price and he knows what he's doing and does a good job? I take it to the second guy. Foul mouth pagan. Why? He's doing his job better than the Christian. And so just because he's Christian doesn't make him more qualified in the left-hand realm. Fixing cars, my friends, is a left-hand thing. Okay? Questions or clarifications on this at all?
So this is how God's working now.
That's right.
Okay.
This is God at work in the world today. So God is at work in our government. And God is at work in the government of Britain. And God is at work in the government of Saudi Arabia.
That's why they say Christ is at God's right hand, because he's working that side now.
Well, to think of the right hand is always the hand of favor, and the left hand would be the kind of third in command. That's typically how it went. Right hand is the most favored position, left hand would be the one beneath that. So that's why we make the distinction. Right hand, well, that's what God's most interested in. We also will sometimes talk about the proper and alien work of God.
Yep.
And we'll say the proper work of God is proclaiming the gospel, giving forgiveness of sins. When he has to, he'll punish and give the harsh word. Well, that's the alien work, the kind of forced on him work of God. And you see that kind of playing in here too. You also see the two kinds of righteousness playing into here. Left-hand realm is all about righteousness horizontal, before men. In the right-hand realm, righteousness is all about vertical before God, being declared forgiven. So you get the kind of two different things going here, and it helps to sort things out. Okay, good? Another question, John?
You pretty much answered part of it there. when you started this morning talking about the duality in the Bible, the human and divine,
Yeah.
that seems to mirror Christ as well.
Yes, intentionally.
Okay.
Because, well, and you think about it. Who is Christ? Christ is the Word of God, God's self-revelation, God making himself known. And even in the Old Testament, we see the second person of the Trinity, I believe, making God known to the people. So frequently in the Old Testament, it talks about the angel of the Lord. Well, when you read about the angel of the Lord, he's doing God stuff. Not angel stuff, God stuff. So the best way to think about angel of the Lord is second person of the Trinity, the Son, making God known to people. That's what Christ does. And so when he's preeminently making things known to us, two natures, true God, true man. That's what you do. You bridge the gap. And he does it by bringing humanity into himself. So the Bible, which is making God known to us, making known the story, has that same nature. It's divine and it's human because it's, in a sense, bridging the gap. God showing himself to us.
But even the angel of the Lord, when the angels appear to Abraham, and they're going to go down to Sodom and Gomorrah and destroy the place, that's pretty left-hand stuff.
Yeah, that's God in judgment. Sure. And it's because he takes seriously his word and his will, and when it's violated, yeah, he'll intervene. You bet it's left-hand stuff. God's doing his thing. Sure. Yes.
The whole scripture thing easily fits into this.
How's that?
Well, left hand being the human part, research and using humans. I mean, the gifts that he's working in. It's the gifts that God's given those people, or their personalities, or their style of writing. And
Sure.
then the right hand is the divine. It's God's.
Yeah, you can see that kind of. There's a correlation there. I can see that. This is really talking about a different issue than that. That's not really talking. This is not trying to talk about how God reveals himself. This is more talking about God's rule in the world. Remember, the distinction, law, gospel, is the question, how does God speak to us? And the distinction, two kinds of righteousness, is how do we stand in our lives, in our relationships? And this one, the two realms, is really asking the question, how does God work in this world? So I've said this at the outset, and you probably forgot it. Don't try to reduce all the different dualities that Lutheranism is full of into one master duality, and they all are just subsets. This is a temptation. I hear it all the time. Well, it's all really just law gospel. Not exactly. Because what you need to realize is all these different dualities are describing answering different questions. The question, how does God speak to me? Law gospel. The law gospel does not become the master paradigm and you shove everything into it. If you try that game, you end up in big problems. But that's another class for another time. You have to wait. And you can't say, well, I see this is just another form of law gospel. Not exactly. What this is answering is, how does God work in the world today? Two realms. And then you ask the question, where do I stand? Well, then the two kinds of righteousness fits in for that. So these different dualities are answering different questions.
For example, the prisoner who gets sentenced.
Yeah.
Right hand, left hand, it's not law and gospel.
That's right. That's right. It's not a law gospel question, it's a right hand, left hand question. He's now, when he's in the judicial system, this is a left hand thing. And so another example, say I'm a Christian judge on the bench, and I've got a guy standing in front of me who's guilty of some certain crime or whatever. I also know he's a Christian and he's very repentant of that. What's my obligation? Well, I'm functioning in the left-hand realm. I need to do the law. I impose sentence. That's my task. The nice illustration of this was there was this sheriff. This was in one of our Lutheran publications a while back. Some sheriff or something out west was tracking down some serial killer or something, and he was just hot on the tail of this guy. They finally tracked him down. They arrested him. They hauled him to jail, and they put him in the jail, and bam, done. Then the sheriff went home, and the sheriff happens to be an LCMS layman, went home, changed his clothes into his civvies, went back to the jail cell, opened the cell, went in, and sat down and shared the gospel with the guy. You see, this guy, I would applaud. He's got it right. Left hand, he's doing his job. Catch the crook, put him in jail. Make sure he gets prosecuted. Right hand, he's concerned about where the guy stands with God and wants him to know what's going on there. They're two different things. And if you don't understand this distinction, you get all mixed up. And you think, well, how can I be a sheriff and bring people, be harsh and judgmental and maybe even shoot people if I'm also supposed to be loving them? It doesn't make sense. A soldier fits into this as well. The same kinds of questions you get faced with. Yeah.
Isn't that what, I think his name is John Roberts, the Supreme Court nominee is going through right
Yeah.
now, is them trying to determine whether he's going to actually, with integrity, serve in the left-hand realm and not get confused?
Yeah, I think that's part of it too. And see,